good afternoon if you are based on the West Coast. My name is Danielle Danko. I'm the Senior Director of Marketing here at Solar Energy Trade Shows, and this is Energy After Hours. We are capping off our full day of hydrogen content with a special focus on hydrogen, and I have two experts with me. I have Bill Elrick, the Executive Director of the California Fuel Cell Partnership, and Nick Barilo, the Executive Director of the Centergen for Hydrogen Safety. And I'm gonna let them give a quick little introduction to their organizations, but before I do, in the chat box, we've asked you a quick question. If you don't mind answering that for us, we'll go over some of those answers at the end of this. And Nick, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, Danielle. So my name is Nick Barilo, Executive Director for the Center for Hydrogen Safety. And a little bit about CHS. We're a global, neutral, and nonprofit resource that supports and promotes the safe handling and use of hydrogen across industrial and consumer applications in the energy transition. We facilitate access to hydrogen safety experts. We develop comprehensive safety guidance, outreach, and education materials, and provide a forum to partner on worldwide technical solutions. Participation in CHS really provides assurance that groups of experts have a common communication platform and a global scope to ensure that the information, guidance, and expertise are available to all stakeholders. So it's really about making sure that information relative to applied hydrogen safety is available broadly. And we've been in existence for about a year and a half, and in that time we have about 36 global members and are moving very quickly and are having some really exciting times. So thanks for being a part of this. Look forward to chatting and answering your questions.
Wonderful. And Bill, if you don't mind giving us a quick overview of the Fuel Cell Partnership, that'd be wonderful.
Sure. You can hear me fine, right?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Bill Elrick with the California Fuel Cell Partnership. We're a public-private collaborative working on the commercialization of hydrogen and fuel cell vehicle markets. And so this means we have state, federal, local governments working hand in hand with automakers, energy developers, education, really the full collective of stakeholders required to make this a self-sustaining market. We've had the same objective for years. We've been in existence for about 20 years now, but really we've worked from the evolution of the early days of R&D to early demonstrations to now really seeing that commercial market come alive. And our primary challenge now is really scaling that up as quickly as possible to get the value that we see across this energy transition that's happening.
Wonderful. Thank you both. So it's been an interesting time in hydrogen. In fact, I'd say probably a very exciting time. Yesterday, the EU released its hydrogen strategy. What overall impact do you think this coordinated approach will have?
Want me to go first?
Yeah, sure.
I think the first thing I'd say is it's a really impressive announcement. It's the right type of approach regarding vision setting, implementation coordination. You know, if we look back, overall, the energy market is really large and complex to begin with, especially with the transition that's happening with renewables and where not just renewables go into the system, but now where hydrogen plays into that, the two energy carriers, electricity and hydrogen, as a vector across applications. And we really need this holistic, long-term collaborative approach to get it right. And I think now, especially with the global pandemic challenges on the economy and the energy system as we have it, it's an opportunity to really rethink this globally. And so I think this initiative in the EU is wonderful for the EU, but it's something that we're seeing more and more of. And so it's exciting to see. It's the type of thing at the right time.
How do you think, Bill, that this stacks up against other approaches that are around the world?
I think it lines up with everything we're seeing. I think what it really does is it emphasizes this is becoming more the norm and the trend than anything. I think there's at least 18 that I last counted national hydrogen strategies forming. And so then seeing these become regional like the EU and how they interact with each other is the way to go. Again, energy is not just complex, it's global and it's interactive. And so I think what this is just the first big announcement of probably many more to come. And I'm excited here in the US. Recently, some industry members got together and put out a US hydrogen roadmap, which is really exciting. And we're seeing places outside of California increasing their activities. So I think we're seeing this trend, and it's absolutely the right thing at the right time.
Great for the industry. I was gonna say, Nick, what safety implications are there?
Let me jump back, if you don't mind, Danielle.
Sure.
Just to cover that for a sec. I was in a conference a couple of years ago, and it was really interesting to have a presentation on acceptance of hydrogen broadly. The conference was geared towards safety, so that was certainly a topic on the acceptance. But a firm did an analysis, sort of a market analysis, if you will, of hydrogen and the barriers to hydrogen deployment. And I thought what was very interesting that came out of that was that in those locations where the governments have gotten behind hydrogen technologies, they've had much greater acceptance. So in countries like Germany and the like, where there's a very large support from the government for hydrogen, you see a much greater acceptance, you see a much greater move. The public is really willing to jump behind it when the government says it's a good idea. In those countries or regions that don't have that support, you see much more of a lag. And so that's a bit of a challenge as well. So the announcement by the EU is a good one, and it follows announcement by some others, including the government of Australia that's recently made an announcement. So this is all exciting times.
It definitely is. Did you want to comment at all about the safety, anything around that on this new announcement, or is it too early?
I didn't. I only had a quick chance to look at part of the 17 pages and didn't see where they were talking extensively about safety, but I'll take a look at that later. And most of the governments recognize. I was in conversation with chief scientists from Australia a few years ago saying, safety needs to be a part of this technology going forth. And I really appreciated his answer. It doesn't need to be a part, it needs to be the first part. So always exciting to see people high up in the government and in the government's activities supporting safety in the rollout.
It's great to have that focus on that early. So Bill, going back to you and going back to the US market, what policies or incentives do we need to do that here in the US, and how can we do that?
I think on the most simplest of terms, what we really need to see is a supportive long-term policy environment that's really aimed at encouraging the private industry to take over, to make the long-term commitments, plans, and investments to scale everything up. There's a lot of desire by industry to do it. There's a lot of opportunity for industry, but that long-term stable policy environment enables those investments to be made with confidence and at scale, and to create that robust, sustainable marketplace. I think there's 1,000 mechanisms or policies we could probably do. I'd point at two of them here in California that we're taking as just good examples. We have the low carbon fuel standard, and there was a recent amendment for hydrogen stations and fast charging to really spur quicker infrastructure development to increase adoption throughout the state. That's the kind of thing that got industry excited about making those investments and being able to make those investments. And similar, we've had a really robust, wonderful support system in the state of California with incentives and grants. But recently, the Clean Transportation Program changed how it did its grant program to really look at investments or grants that would go towards those that showed their long-term strategy and expanding strategy for infrastructure development. That solicitation is already in their hands, and they're looking over all the proposals. We're hoping to see that, I'll say, any day, week, or soon. But it's the right kind of long-term policy environment that allows industry to really plan ahead. And that's what we've got to do, because this is so large. Other than that, I think things that look at individually and collectively, the fuel, the renewable source of that, the vehicle, and then the network and production and everything that goes with it. So, you want to hit upon all the pieces of the market so that all those investments can hit all the pieces and we don't miss anything.
So do you think that renewable hydrogen could ever be cost competitive with conventional and electric energy? Is that something that's in our near future or?
Yeah, absolutely. And more excited now than if you asked me that even a few years ago. You know, just as we saw wind and solar prices come down as they were hitting scale, and think of how much skepticism was in those early years. But when the right policies really reinforced that, now that's competitive and even better than in many cases. And we've seen a lot of studies come out in the last year that back that up and show that renewable hydrogen will be cost competitive in the next 5 to 10 years if we take the right approaches. And again, that tracks with the example of solar and wind. And I think if I take it a step further, when we look at not only what's happening in those markets already, but all the different applications for hydrogen, for transportation, both light and heavy duty, for storage, manufacturing, energy production, those feed upon each other and they help lower costs around all of them together. So they really interact in a synergistic way. So short answer is absolutely it'll be cost competitive. It's getting there quicker is the opportunity we need to take.
I think that's so exciting. Nick, I have a quick question for you. So given the increased interest in renewable hydrogen projects, do you see a change in safety challenges that'll need to be addressed kind of as the industry speeds up?
Yeah, I think, we talk a lot, we have a lot of discussions with a lot of different groups about safety, and I think it's clear that industry that has used hydrogen for almost a century understands the safety issues and how to transport it and use it and store it and do all those things. I think the challenge now, though, is we're bringing a whole new group of users. So it's those that are building new applications and new facilities, as well as the public and the stakeholders and the code officials and all those. We have a whole new group that's coming into using hydrogen that may not have the experience or the expertise to do that real easily. And so I think the challenge is to make sure that we all work together to communicate those best practices, those that are needed, the lessons learned that we have from previous applications. And so it isn't so much that we don't know how to do those things. I think there's a lot of good safety practices and codes and standards have really started to mature very quickly in those areas. But I think it's really communication, getting the information into the hands of those that are new and that may not be aware of all those issues. And then also bringing the learnings back from the people that have great experience. So it's a matter of connecting that community together so that we're all working towards a common goal. I think like any technology in the newer stages, we recognize that if things go wrong, that can be very impactful. And so so it's important that we all learn from each other, work together, and try to do the right things to make sure it's successful and is beneficial.
I know those are a lot of the initiatives that both your organization, Nick, and Bill, your organization, are working on within the U.S. So,
yeah, indeed.
Yeah. I'd like to wrap this back around to solar energy and the greater renewable energy industry. Bill, this is specifically for you. How do you think hydrogen and solar intersect? Which applications and activities do you think are going to be most impactful for solar when it comes to hydrogen?
I think right now, and maybe it's just because it's really starting to get exciting, is looking at the big electrolyzer projects, the big energy production using solar. There's been some announcements just in the last few days around some, I can't recall the numbers. I want to say that they're at the gigawatt scale, but there are many hundreds of megawatts. I'm pretty certain of seeing in Australia and else that those are really going to drive a lot of market activity. They will open by creating that scale. They're going to open, I think, unleash a little bit the opportunity for more solar, because now instead of solar without something of hydrogen storage or application use, you have to really think of how much solar you want to build in an area. But with hydrogen tied to it in some of these mega projects, I think we're going to see that become, especially out of this Australia project, build all the solar you can, and then we'll turn that into hydrogen, and then we'll ship that around to places in the world where they don't have green hydrogen. And those investments are so large, the impact of creating that much solar hydrogen to be used in transportation, or to be used in energy production or manufacturing of cement and other things that are big opportunities. I think those are the most exciting right now, and will drive the market. You know, we deal with just transportation. I think we were the exciting, sexy application for the last 10, 20 years, but I think we're going to get dwarfed pretty quickly by some of these bigger projects that really do tie hydrogen and solar together.
Nick, do you want to comment on that at all, or are there any unique safety concerns around solar and hydrogen, or maybe specific to that Australian project?
I think, no, I don't think there's anything hugely unique. I mean, it's the production and storage of hydrogen and making sure we do that safely. And then there's solar has its own set. There's an interface point there, but I think that interface point for the most part is well understood by both organizations, whether it be on the power side or the hydrogen generation side. So I think it's actually a really good mix. I think that it offers a great opportunity, and I would agree with Bill, and we're looking at more and more desire for renewable production plants. I think, you know, as the demand for hydrogen goes up, whether it be at the light duty vehicle level, or whether it be heavy duty vehicles later on, there's going to be a greater and greater need for production of hydrogen, and renewable is ultimately, we want to end up with renewable as the primary source for that, instead of some of the ways that we're doing it now. So I think the future looks bright. Not to be putting a pun there, but I think the future looks bright for it. I see there's a couple of questions coming in on the Q&A. I don't know if you were catching those, Danielle.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's definitely take a question. It looks like there's a good one from Joe.
This is a Bill question. I could see it coming up.
Is it? Can you? I'll read it first. I'm not sure everybody sees it. Can you elaborate on what is being or needs to be done with respect to the necessary infrastructure in terms of specifics versus just noting their infrastructure policies being discussed at state levels? In other words, do we know of specific infrastructure projects that need to be done or perhaps are being done? I think I'd start first with production of hydrogen. You know, hydrogen's been around for decades as far as production. It has been mostly steam reformation, but we're seeing now a big push towards the electrolyzer using the renewables. And so I think when it look at the policies, it's driving the green hydrogen. And when we look at the infrastructure projects, we need more hydrogen. You know, everything that's being used today is essentially was built for a specific purpose. Hydrogen for oil refineries, hydrogen for fertilizer production or something else. And for us in the transportation market, very little new was being built to support the transportation market. And so we really need to create more hydrogen from the very basic production level, first and foremost, so that's a sustainable market. I think then when you start to do that, and have several examples around the US and I'm certain around the world as these markets expand, now let's look at the distribution channels for that. You know, how do we get that hydrogen to where it's needed? And there's many ways to do that as well. And some of those go right into Nick's channel on making sure we're doing it properly and safely. And then all the way to, I'll say, the end user, be that a hydrogen station for transportation, or be that for, again, cement manufacturing or something else. So I think what's really crazy in a way, but exciting, is we need almost every piece of infrastructure from production and distribution to end use, because we're expanding applications of hydrogen, things that had never used hydrogen before. And so I don't mean it to sound too wide of an answer, but it really is that wide. We need about anything you can think of infrastructure around this, and it's focusing on which ones and which knobs start to push the rest of the market forward.
Sounds great. There's another really good question from our audience, and it's along the lines of what we were just talking about. How important is distributed generation for the future of hydrogen?
Looking in a crystal ball, I think absolutely. I think maybe that's an open question, meaning I believe absolutely we'll need more distributed distribution period, but I don't know if we understand fully the mix of on-site versus distribution. And I think each application will be different. You know, I live in the transportation world. Just staying within that, I see a lot of opportunities in many regions to be either on-site or locally distributed. And if I just look at the Los Angeles region, I'll say that in Orange County and the periphery, there's a lot of distribution happening there, but there can also be quite a bit of on-site. If I just go from Orange County to LA County, between the urban mass that is there, there's no space for on-site. And so I think that's going to be more of a distribution network. And whether that's trucking in, whether that's pipelines at some point, you're just not going to get that much on site. And so I think that's just transportation. Just even within one metro area, you're going to see a mix, and it's going to be different for each region. We go from there and each application.
That's great. So we asked a question to our audience earlier in this, and we said, what is the one solar to hydrogen project you'd like to see developed? And we had an answer that was really interesting, which was fuel cell powered scooters, which sounds like a lot of fun to me. Nick, anything you'd like to see developed? Anything in your?
Anything I'd like to see developed. I'm a big fan. So this is a great discussion because I'm a big fan. I heard about 8 years ago when I was talking with someone at the National Lab about hydrogen and the future of fuel cells. And you know, it's just intriguing to me to have the concept of solar on a house and then be producing hydrogen and then storing that hydrogen. Then when you have off peak on the solar, you can use the hydrogen in a fuel cell to power the house. So that, you know, that it just excites me, the thought of being able to run my house at 70 degrees in the summer or 75 in the winter and not pay $1 more for it. That sounds really good to me. Right? So he was clear to me that it's not going to be any cheaper, but the convenience factor, the quality of life goes way up when you can do those sort of things and pull off the grid and sort of manage your energy yourself. So that's the one that I think is really appealing.
Reliability with that will be interesting as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, very efficient. Bill, how about yourself? Anything you thought would be really cool to be created, developed?
Wonder if he's hearing us.
I was gonna say,
oh, there you go.
Oh, there you go.
Welcome back.
Everybody froze on me. I don't know what you heard, so I'll go where you lead me.
So sorry, I was just saying, is there anything that any solar to hydrogen project you'd like to see developed?
You know, it's one that it struck me thinking of the scooter and kind of getting on the opposite scale from housing, and that's phones and computers. And I'll tie it right to Nick's answer of the house. If the house is a solar hydrogen house and we're able to use that within the house, when I plug my phone in, and I can say that I have seen some models by some big phone manufacturers that I might be having a battery and electricity type phone, or I might have a fuel cell and a small hydrogen opportunity within that phone where I'm using the solar hydrogen to hydrogen power my phone. And that the opportunity is the bigger energy storage, and the challenge with phones and laptops is we always run out of power. And so, you know, all that wrapped together would be a wonderful thing to see. And I think that's the exciting part, well beyond what I'm doing in transportation, but seeing renewable energy, hydrogen and electricity as energy carriers touching all of our lives in so many different ways. You know, that's the excitement and the opportunity.
I think you're definitely right. And that's something I would like to see myself. I know we've covered a lot in the last almost 30 minutes. Before we close out, is there anything else either you would like to comment on?
Well, I just see somebody put another question about the importance of collaboration of batteries and fuel cells. And I'd like to touch that. It's a great point. Thanks, Peter. They're complementary. You know, I started in the battery realm 20 some years ago, and we absolutely need those, but they don't fit every application. And hydrogen's the same way. It might be newer to the market, but it doesn't fit every application. They're different and they're complementary. frankly, just like gasoline and diesel were. And I think we need both of them to, as energy carriers, to bring that renewable energy into our life and use and do the things we want to do with the cleanest way possible, and economically create businesses around them. And so I think it's really important we don't pit them against each other, which in the early stages where funding is limited, that's always a challenge. But the technologies are very similar. They're very complementary, and they're very exciting, not just alone, but together.
I think I would agree with that, Bill. And I think the challenge is not battery and fuel cell. It's electric versus fossil fuel. I think we're moving towards electrification, and that's a really good thing. And I think both bring opportunities and both bring advantages in certain applications. And it's really important that we don't get caught up into that argument. I think both need to coexist, and both will have areas where it's just real beneficial that one maybe wins out over another. I could think of long range trucking, so that is probably better served by fuel cells than batteries, and certainly some other applications are better served by batteries or complemented by batteries than fuel cells may be. So yeah, I would go along with that. There's another one here about your crystal ball that might be.
When do you anticipate hydrogen? Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
When do you anticipate hydrogen technology becoming financially viable? And I'll jump in on first on that one. So I think in certain applications it already is. Yeah. I mean, fuel cell forklifts are a good one, in which in the late 2000s, DOE funded quite a bit of demonstration projects on that. They've since pulled off of that because that whole industry has taken off by itself. The advantage of a fuel cell forklift versus a battery forklift. In that case, the fuel cell provides a steady power curve throughout the life of the day and its activities, and so there's no limitations. On a battery, you might have to pull lighter loads, pull lower loads, and do those sort of things, and then you have the hour-and-a-half charge. On a fuel cell, it's just a flat curve. You don't have any of those issues, and then it's like a 5 to 10 minute refill in the middle of the warehouse. So that's there. I think there are applications that are seeing that right now. Another one is perhaps cell tower sites that using fuel cells as a backup power supply. There's probably well over 10,000 of those now in the United States, and many more worldwide. And so again, there are certainly applications we're already there. And I think going back to the fuel cells, I think I have a number on one of my slides that I think it's BMW said they save about 65 million annually using forklift over battery forklifts. So quite a bit of cost savings there. Bill, I'll let you chime in on other areas.
No, I think that's it. It depends on the application, and you were going right where I was, where some are already there. I think in transportation, if I roll out my crystal ball, we can do this before 2030. We can make it competitive, sustainable. You just have to do the right actions between then and now. And really something I was meaning to say earlier, thinking around, was a handful of years ago when they looked at the planned electrolyzer capacity. It was in I believe the 100 megawatts. And a couple of years ago, they updated it to something like 3-point-something gigawatts. And then just early this year, they came out and said, now the planned electrolyzer is at 8-point-something gigawatts. So it's rapidly increasing. And I think when we see that happening, the answer to whatever year we pick gets much quicker. And so this is the excitement of this production and electrolyzers and solar, and building on this just moves every one of the application answers forward.
It sounds like you have a pretty good grasp on your crystal ball, actually.
So far.
What's the lottery number for tomorrow?
3, 5, 10. I can't give it away, or then people stop working on this. We need everybody to be working on this.
Exactly. I think those are all the questions we have right now. We do have a hello from Australia. Hydrogen is marching on, and that's exciting.
Greetings, Peter in Australia. I've been doing quite a bit of interaction with folks in Australia. Good group down there, and they're really getting excited. They put a national hydrogen strategy out last year, and they're really moving forward. And it's pretty exciting to see what they're doing. Quite a bit of activity going on down there.
Yeah.
That's really exciting. Anything else that either of you would like to end with? I know we talked about a lot.
I guess I would, I just encourage the listeners that hydrogen can be used safely. That we have some stigmas that are attached. Everybody thinks of the H word, the Hindenburg word, every time we talk about hydrogen, but it can be used safely. There's been a lot of work to look at safety and codes and standards and regulations, both nationally and internationally. And it's a matter of really understanding some of the issues, and as well as getting the information. I would also suggest, because we have these conversations frequently, that we look, and hydrogen is new, so that's a little bit scary to most folks, but like all energy sources, hydrogen has its hazards. So does electricity, so does gasoline, so does natural gas. And the key is to take proper care and caution when we do those things, and we're moving strongly in that direction. So I think the future really is, I'm excited about the future. I've been involved in hydrogen since 2006, and I'm really excited. I think we've never seen the level of activity that we've seen lately. And I think it's all just going to keep going forward, and pretty pumped about where it's going. Bill.
I would say if you have any safety questions, go to Nick and the center. I've worked with Nick for years, and I can go back to, and I know he was involved with this, but one of the first events I went to when I got into the hydrogen world was a training on emergency response folks. And I expected the Hindenburg and all the fear. And when they went through the technology, they asked hard questions. I believe one question was, what do you do when a hydrogen car is stuck up in a tree upside down? And our safety expert, Jennifer Hamilton, looked at him and said something equivalent of, well, what would you do if it was a gasoline car? And he went through the process. The process is this. And he responded, and it really struck me that, to Nick's point, anything that can move a vehicle like this does have danger involved. You just need to know how to respond to it and act accordingly. And when that answer was given to him, he's like, okay, great. I understand no more about hydrogen, the technology, and what it is. And so it really helped me as a newcomer at the time to hydrogen. But I think that's the beauty of it. And, I'll give that plug back to Nick and everything he and the center and really all the folks out there on the safety side have done. It's really exciting. So makes us all happy and safe.
It does. And we need both of your organizations to keep the industry moving forward. So thank you so much, Nick. Thank you so much, Bill, for joining us tonight. I'd like to remind our attendees, if they want more hydrogen content and want to learn more about it, we have the Virtual Center for Hydrogen Safety, the Europe Conference 2020. It's October 20th through 22nd, and you can find that on the website. And if you want to join us at North America Smart Energy Week, we have a series of 6 micro conferences starting in September, going through the end of October. You can also join us for a virtual expo, or you can join us in person as well outside of Las Vegas Convention Center, October 21st through 22nd. And we look forward to seeing you in some capacity in the fall. Thank you again, Bill. Thank you again, Nick. Really enjoyed talking to you both this evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.